Okay guys, welcome back. It's time to take a look at the Nightmare. Now, believe it or not, I actually used to fly this thing 2 years ago, and on my Nightmare I had about, I think, 40 or 50 kill marks. There's basically no ship in the game that doesn't have kill marks. I flew most of the ships in the game and I flew most of them in PvP. Now, the Nightmare is primarily a tank, and with the recent changes it will be interesting to see how this thing performs. Now, the Nightmare hasn't been changed much. I believe they actually added a bit more DPS to this ship. Last time when I was flying one, it had about 1240 or 50 DPS. Now I believe that is slightly increased. Robos can fit shield field modules, advanced large laser operation bonus plus 15% large laser damage, plus 75% large laser attacking speed. Advanced Battleship command bonus will give you plus 30% afterburner speed and plus 5% shield increase per skill level. A classic Sansha ship, they have a very nice bonus on shields and afterburners, and they are unique because they can fit the shield field modules, which means they can be very good guardians. Now, the Nightmare is primarily a shield tank. You should not armor tank any Sansha ship. They have fantastic shields and you should take advantage of that, although unfortunately I have seen a lot of armor tank Nightmares, a lot of armor tank Phantasm ships, and the Succubus also. A lot of them unfortunately were armor tanks, so yeah, don't armor tank these ships. They have fantastic capacitors. 16,000 is the capacitor on this ship, which means that the capacitor on the Nightmare will be running for a very long time, and of course we have 7 low slots, which means that you can make this thing extremely tanky. The main trait on the Nightmare is its fantastic tank. Now, the first thing that I notice is the DPS 1.4 thousand, which is a little bit higher than the DPS that I saw on this thing last time, but again, the main trait on this ship is definitely not going to be its DPS. And the Nightmare is not a solo ship, mostly used in big fleets. It's used in the dormant realms, it's also used for large PvE fleets. Overall, the Nightmare's main purpose is to be a guardian, to be a tank. Now, this is an old build that I have on this ship: triple adapters, dual boosters, 1 afterburner and 1 capacitor battery. As for the nanocore, you have a lot of options. Now, since this ship is primarily a tank, I believe most of you guys will go for the extra shield volume or extra let's say shield boost performance. I'm pretty sure some of the nanocores have the option to increase the shield boosted performance. And aesthetically, the Nightmare does have a lot of very good looking nanocores. Now, I'll be trying out the DPS the DPS Nightmare later on, just for the lols, just to see how broken the DPS can get with the implants. So I'm very excited to see how that will go. And you can also go with the afterburner trait on the nanocores, because this thing is actually quite fast. So the combat rigs are 4P combat integration modules. Most Nightmares that are rolling in PvP or PvE are heavily integrated, although you don't really have to go with the integrations. I will show you a cheap option as well, as I usually do nowadays. But this current Nightmare is focused on maximum shield resistance and maximum shield volume, and now have 120,000 shield, 48, 58, 69 and 55% resistance, which is a lot of shield, and it is of course obvious that the Nightmare is the tankiest battleship in the game. Can be challenged by the Nestor, by the way. So Nestor and the Nightmare are some of the tankiest ships in the game. I would say Nestor can be potentially a bit more tanky, but I guess that is situational, because the Nestor can have better armor resistance because of the thermal circulation implant. Okay, now before you think that I forgot my fuel, don't worry. I have some fuel left in this thing. Let me just quickly readjust the modules. Now you have a shield tank guardian and a armor tank guardian. In the realm of battleships, the shield tank guardian would be the Nightmare, the armor tank guardian would be the Nestor, although the Nestor can also do some... the Nestor can do everything, so the Nestor is kinda unique. But they both can be guardian ships. 821,000 hit points, 82, 86, 69 and 85% resistance. And I'm fairly satisfied with how this looks. Now you have the shield bubble, the shield field module that will increase the resistance by 15%. And now 940,000 hit points, 85, 88. But the thing is, you will get a massive signature radius adjustment, 3000% extra signature, so now the signature radius of this thing is like a dreadnought, but you get 15% extra resistance, and this is the small bubble. The other medium and large bubbles increase the radius even more, I believe. I think they all have a unique trait, but at the same time I think they also might have the same bonus, so most of the time I prefer the small bubble, but if you have a huge fleet then you want to have a huge bubble. So the bubble is mostly going to be used for a fleet, although you can technically also use it if you're solo for your own stats, but it's not as it used to be because the shield field bubble got nerfed and now it reduces your DPS and it also adds 100 points to your ship, so you can't warp. So the bubble has been changed, the shield field bubble has been nerfed, and that is something that you should keep in mind, but still this thing is quite speedy. Now the next build that you can do is with triple lattice, one reactive and dual boosters. Now if you are in a fleet, there is a high chance that you'll have a lot of logistic ships. There is also there's going to be a lot of ships that use the group capacitor boosters, so you don't really have to use batteries if you are in a massive fleet. In a smaller fleet, if you don't have any ships that can support you with capacitor, then I would suggest that you use capacitor batteries. But in massive fleets or in situations where you don't have to repair your own shield, where let's say you have other ships that take care of that, you don't have to go with capacitor batteries. And in a massive fleet I would probably go full on resistance, full on tank, because that way you have good stats, good shield stats, and you can rely on your teammates to supply you with capacitor and with shield repairs. Almost a million hit points, 183,000, 86, 88, 91 and 89% resistance, which is, you know, pretty good. Let's dock and let me change the build.
Docking request
one more time. I sacrificed one booster for a damage control, and most of the times in a big fleet you can run with a build like this. One booster should be enough, although that one booster can be replaced for anything else, because most of the repairs will be coming from the logistic ships in your fleet. And now let's undock to check out the stats.
Undocking.
So far, I'm pretty happy with the Nightmare, although I kind of feel like the Rattlesnake had better shield stats, which is a little bit weird. I think that the Rattlesnake had it has lower resistance, but it has, no, my apologies, the Rattlesnake has higher resistance but lower shield, while this has the volume but not as much resistance. Well, 938,000 hit points with the current build, 24 minutes is the capacity runtime, and when the bubble is up, the resistance is 1.1076 million, 87, 89, 92 and 90%. I think this should still be quite tanky, definitely going to take a while to go through that shield. And 3.1 million, 3.18 million hit points when the damage control is active, 96, 96 and 97% resistance. Pretty tanky, so far quite satisfied with the tank, although I kind of feel like I expected more So I have that feeling that I expected a little bit more out of this ship, which is a little bit weird because the Nightmare supposedly is the. I mean, it is the tankiest battleship in the one of the tankiest shield tank ships in the game. Now, one of the old school builds is triple adaptives and triple extenders. 159,000 in shield, 451,000 hit points. Now, this build sacrifices some resistance for a lot of shield volume, and with the Nightmare you can use the Focus Crystal and the Pulse Crystal implant. Now, for the general units with this build, I would focus on extender, shield hit points. That means let me just add the extender unit. Now, one thing where I don't really like to use the Pulse Crystal on shield tank ships is because the level 45 attribute is basically killing your own shield for extra capacitor. And I think I will show you that in action here. It's a very hilarious aspect of the implant, which makes it not really Sansha friendly, but you can still take advantage of the damage bonus. Just don't use the capacitor recharge because it's going to kill your own ship. 1.6 thousand DPS, which is a little bit higher because of the implant. 1 million hit points, 82, 86, 89 and 85% resistance, which is not bad at all. And now the capacitor is stable at about 55%, about that number. With the shield fill bubble up, the tank will be a little bit better. I expect 1.1 million, 1.23 million. Oh, okay, well, I was close. Still, good DPS and 85, 88, 91 and 87% resistance. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this outcome. Definitely a tanky little boat. Capacitor stable, 9.1 kilometers is the signature radius, so you definitely are going to be hit, but your tank should hold. After all, this build is mostly for a fleet, and the speed is still going to be about 850 meters per second. Now the thing is, if your target is inside of your bubble, inside of the shield bubble, then your teammates will take the damage. So basically, targets outside of the bubble will be impacting the shield bubble, but if the target goes in, then your bubble is not going to be as effective. So drones, for example, that orbit close are going to be doing damage to your ships, to your allied ships in the bubble, because they can avoid the effect. And that is one of the ways how you counter the Nightmare. You basically go inside of the bubble and then you basically kill them. 2.7 thousand DPS when the implant is active. The capacitor runtime is 12 minutes and 49 seconds. This is because the Pulse Crystal does impact the power usage of your lasers. Basically, it increases the power usage but increases the DPS, and therefore it also increases the capacitor usage. So for a build that uses the Pulse Crystal, you have to have a really good capacitor. So the Nightmare with its capacitor should be lasting quite long with the Pulse Crystal. Although again, this ship is not primarily a DPS ship, and for such a ship it still has some good DPS, and it has some very good tank. A Nightmare again is not a solo ship, but I'll see what I can do later on when I do the cursed DPS build on this thing. Now let me just quickly show you what the Pulse Crystal does to your shield. Now I know that this is level 45, and if you have the implant on level 30 or level 15, you are not going to have the 45 attribute unlocked, so you will not have the option to kill your own shield, which is a good thing. Which is a very good thing, because shield is life. If you lose your shield on this ship, the ship is basically dead. So these implants with the level 45 attribute active, yeah, it's something that doesn't really work well. Although the level 15 secondary can give you some interesting traits, but yeah, for shield tanks, for Sansha ships, this attribute on level 45 is a little bit unpleasant, because yeah, there goes my shield. You don't have to use that. I mean, you don't have to go with level 45. That's why I say that level 15 or level 30 is optimal. Level 45 is just overkill, and well, it literally will kill your ship if you use it. So yeah, not a implant for shield tanks. Definitely not a implant for shield tanks. Although you can use it, just avoid killing your own shield. Okay, now let me go with the focused crystal. This is the implant that I'm fairly sure most of you will probably use on this ship. Now the focus crystal has been changed a lot lately. That the focus crystal has been nerfed, and then some extra nerves on top of that, and some little extra nerves on top, and some more nerves. So this implant is constantly in a state of being nerfed. Now up until recently, you were able to charge the implant on the station. Well, guess not anymore. Well, now it treats 0 damage as a miss, so I can't charge the implant on the station or gate anymore. Okay, well, I'll be very angry if they left this feature untouched on some of the other implants. If they already prevent the focus crystal from stacking up on the station, I hope that they prevent the other implants from doing the same thing. I'll be testing that out very, very soon with some of the other implants, but I'm actually happy that you can't stack them anymore on the gate, although at the same time it kind of messes up some of our tactics, because we used to charge the hyperlocal or thermal circulation on the station, but I guess that might not be possible anymore on these implants. Again, I'll be testing that out just out of pure curiosity. So this is the cheaper option on the Nightmare, although I'm fairly sure no one uses the cheaper option on the Nightmare, but anyway, triple tank rigs, anti-EM, anti-thermal, or dual anti-EM, and in this case I placed one anti-kinetic. But since you are a shield tank, and since there's a good chance that you'll be fighting laser ships, and lasers do EM and thermal, make sure that you cover the EM and thermal, and then everything else can go with the adaptives, but the EM and thermal resistance has to be good on shield tanks, because lasers melt shields and you don't want to get melted. And of course a reactive shield hardener helps with this as well, because it does work excellent against weapon types that have only 2 damage, that only does 2 damage types. And you can use this build with the passive Nightmare, you can use this build with the active Nightmare. Again, works with all of the previous builds that I show you here. Works with the active boosters with 1 booster, works with the full chunk build with triple adapters, 1 damage roll and 1 reactive. All that does work really well on this ship. Now I keep the afterburner just because the Nightmare can do a very good speed tank. And speaking of tank, it has some very nice stats, even with the cheaper option. Almost 160,000 hit points, and I'm fairly happy with that. Now, oh man, did this hurt to build? Yes, it did. A DPS Nightmare. Well, actually, surprisingly, it has some pretty good DPS. I was kind of shocked to find out how well it looks. This is the Nightmare with the cursed burst adapter rigs, 3 of them, and everything else is about the same. But if I would go and use a build like this for PvP, this is basically the same build that I roll on the Macarial, on the Rattlesnake, same build that I roll on most of my PvP battleships and cruisers and battlecruisers. I would probably go with extra speed, basically a hit and run nightmare. So triple auxiliary thrusters will be of benefit here for extra afterburner speed. It's as fast as a Battleship with a micro warp drive, so definitely a very crazy idea. And for the medium slot modules, dual scrummers and a web, or triple scrummers depending on the target. Because of 1000 stabs, triple scrummers are mostly going to be recommended. As for the general units, well, heatsink units and, well, the third slot can be anything, but first let me go with the pulse crystal, because for the focus crystal I'll have to go in a mission to charge it, and then I'll show the maximum DPS that you can achieve with the nightmare. But first let's take a look at the cursed DPS build nightmare with the pulse crystal. If this gets over 9000 DPS, then I don't know, then there is something seriously wrong with the game. I'm just saying that. Okay, a little bit of 15,000 IQ moment here. I never thought that I'll do a DPS nightmare, but here I am doing a DPS nightmare. So 5.6 thousand. Okay, well, and it shockingly has still a crazy tank. Okay, well, damage control active, almost a million hit points. Yeah, there is something seriously wrong with this game. 83, 87, 90 and 92%, 953,000 hit points. I have a lot of questions. 6.9 thousand, nice. With dual heatsinks, 8.1 thousand, okay. With triple heatsinks, 9,094, oh no. 9,552.12 DPS. Are you kidding me? Yeah, there is. Well, here we go. A DPS nightmare can actually work. Does actually look like a normal battleship that I use for PvP. It does have about. I know it sounds absolutely insane, but it has about the same DPS as the DPS Ralsnik with drone bombs, although the drone bombs feel a little bit more lethal. 1.2 kilometers per second afterburner speed. Oh man, if that's the pulse crystal DPS, what's going to be the focus crystal DPS? I know it's nerfed. I know the implant is nerfed, but can you imagine what number I'll get with that? Well, actually, we're about to find out. Don't have to speculate when I can just simply go and show you. Okay, changing to the focus crystal. It's still painful to look at a DPS sniper. Trust me, it's painful to look at it. But at the same time, I'm kind of impressed by the DPS output on this thing. It can be a very surprising ship, I guess. No one expects a nightmare to just drops on you with 9,000 DPS. With a level 30 pulse crystal, the DPS would be about 8.5 thousand. So with the level 30 implant, you still have some insane DPS, and with level 15, that's about 6.5 thousand. So even with level 15 implant, you get about that number. So that's still more than enough to kill most ships. After all, this is a nightmare. You have a lot of tank, and you can technically sacrifice some heatsinks for extra passive tank, depending on the target. So yeah, the DPS nightmare is potentially a serious threat. I can't believe that I'm saying that, but yeah, potentially a serious threat. So if you see a random nightmare landing on your battleship in LoLsec, just assume that they watched this video and just assume that they're probably rolling like 8,000 DPS or something. So yeah, just try to warp off. So let's take a look at the focus crystal DPS, and I'm having some a bit of let's. Oh my god, I have forgot how to speak. A bit of chest pain for some reason. Hopefully nothing still happens from time to time. Anyway, let's charge up the focused crystal. Now, I'm looking at this thing and trying to figure out what will work best for PvP.
We're under
Pulse crystal or focus crystal. A DPS build sniper. I think, yeah, those cursed builds are definitely having a toll on my builds. Anyway, I think for low sec hit and run, the pulse crystal will work really well. Basically, you drop on the target, you unleash all the DPS, you kill the target, and then you warp off. That's basically what I would do. However, in a longer battle, I guess the focus crystal is going to technically give you more DPS, but at the same time, it's going to be a bit more tricky to use it because you expect the battle to last a while. After all, you have to charge the implant. Now, the implant does seem to be charging a little bit faster. It does achieve the maximum DPS faster, but that maximum DPS has been reduced. So that's I guess one thing that will work for a idea like this. Now, don't engage small ships with a build like this because the Nightmare doesn't have that good tracking. It's mostly good for battlecruisers and battleships, but anything below that should be able to easily speed tank you. So don't launch a Nightmare on a bunch of cruisers. If you launch Nightmare on a battleship, that's going to be a good matchup. And I can definitely see this build, although I would say a pretty cursed build because the Nightmare should never be a DPS, but yeah, here we are with a DPS Nightmare, I guess. Will work really well against battleships. You could technically speed tank them because of your very fast velocity. Afterburner bonus goes in, I guess. And with time, once you achieve your maximum DPS, the enemy will probably be unable to tank your DPS. After all, anything above like 4,000-5,000 DPS is kind of overkill nowadays because most builds out there are not that good, unfortunately. So even a Nightmare with a build like this, with even with like 6,000 DPS, you will be having more than enough DPS to go through their tank. 6,400 DPS. Okay, I nailed that one. 7,900 DPS with the second heatsink. It's 9,400 DPS with the third heatsink. 10,488, and with the last one, you gotta be kidding me. 11,000 DPS. That is Apocalypse Striker level DPS with about the same build. Actually, no. That's Apocalypse Striker level DPS with beam lasers in Siege. The Apocalypse Striker has a bit more DPS with pulse lasers, so I think about like 13,000-14,000 DPS, which is still ridiculously close. This is actually kind of insane that this thing can have so much DPS. What is wrong with these ships? Why is a Nightmare a good DPS all of a sudden?
Warp drive active.
Well, I mean, I'm not really surprised. I'm not surprised, but surprised. A very weird feeling that I have currently. A very, very, very weird feeling. And I will still say that the Nightmare should not be built for tank, but if you want to, I don't know, do a 20,000 IQ move, then I guess try out the DPS Nightmare. Still cursed, but you know, the DPS is, oh man, such a difficult. I don't know how to feel about this thing. I have no idea how to feel about this thing. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it cursed? Is it horrible? Is it forsaken?
Warp drive active.
How to classify this? I don't know. A Guardian, that's DPS all of a sudden. Maybe you might be rolling in your chair right now laughing at my reaction here, but I don't know how to approach this thing. I mean, it has almost about the same DPS as my Macariel that I use for PvP, and it has actually better sustained DPS than my Macariel that's used for PvP because, you know, barrage doesn't last long. It lasts for like 15-20 seconds, while the pulse crystal can last 30 seconds, 45 seconds, depending on
We're
your
under
heat sink,
attack.
depending on your large laser skill and depending on overall
We're
all of
under
your laser
attack.
skills, because they do increase the heat sink runtime. So yeah, the Nightmare with this build has better sustained DPS than a Macarial that's built with the same build with the same purpose. Okay then, well, I guess the Nightmare has received a new purpose, a DPS purpose. It's so cursed, it's so cursed, but it works. Well then, let's just quickly run this mission. Well, and since you can technically use the cursed DPS build for PvP, it also means that you can use a similar cursed idea for PvE, and I'm hitting 21,000 alphas on shield, about 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 alphas on armor, 15, 17,000 on hull.
Enemy ships detected. We're under attack.
The only downside, I guess, would be
We're
that
under
your
attack.
range is not nearly as good as some of the other proper combat ships, and the tracking is also
We're under
not as
attack.
good as the tracking on some of the other combat ships. I remember someone saying that if you want to get under the Nightmare guns, you should try orbit at like 9 kilometers or at 0, or very close. The tracking is not going to be able to keep up, and then the Nightmare is basically toasted. So yeah, avoid fighting small ships. Small ships are going to be a major threat. Now you can add a neutralizer web and a scrambler as well. The neutralizer can work really well against small targets. Dual neutralizers can also work against small targets. Basically, you kill their capacitor very quickly.
Enemy ships
There is a lot of
detected.
ways how to build this ship for PvP to
We're
have good
under
defense
attack.
against smaller ships. But for a build that I showed you before, the best defense against smaller ships is to completely avoid them. And because, I mean, even if you
We're
get tackled by
under
them,
attack.
in most cases, if you have a web and a neutralizer, you eventually will be able to get out of their webs and scramblers, because you will kill their capacitor, and they can't do anything when that happens. Perhaps even when that happens, you can actually track them and basically easily kill them. I think there's a lot of piloting involved, a lot of piloting skills involved with that idea. Now, so far I haven't seen any DPS Nightmare out there with the build that I showed you earlier. Most of the Nightmares that I have seen, most of them that I destroyed, and most of them that my friends have destroyed, all have a tank build. 99% had a tank build. The 1% had a weird fusion build between DPS and tank, basically like 1 or 2 heat sinks and everything else adaptives, things, weird things like that. But I haven't seen any Nightmare that used the PvP build that I showed you before, so that's going to be interesting. If those things start to crawl around, that's going to be so cursed and so funny at the same time. But how do I feel about Nightmare? I don't know how to feel about this ship.
Warp drive
I love the tank. I shockingly love the DPS on this thing as well, and it's a very hilarious ship at the moment. Did not expect Nightmare to roll that DPS at all. Like, that's a surprise for me. I expected like 6,000. I mean, let's be real. I expected 6,000 DPS maximum. Like, that's what I expected. I did not expect to break 10,000. That kind of shocked me. But in any case, I had a lot of fun flying this thing today, and definitely gave me some ideas for the future ships that I'll fly. Definitely gave me a
Docking
lot
request
of
accepted.
new ideas for a lot of other ships that I plan to show you. But with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this, let's say, interesting and this cursed run with the Nightmare. And if you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.